Hello and welcome to Beach View, our podcast about different things and/or stuff.
Welcome. Today we have a special guest with us, and that is my husband, Travis.
Hey.
Trav has been I think a 3-time guest on our podcast. Thank you for joining us again.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yes, and we're going to be doing some more genre stuff. And we're talking about heist media.
Yeah, so we got a little bit into heist media when I think maybe might have mentioned it when we were talking about other genres. I think like the detective genre type of thing.
Yes.
And I mentioned about how Travis likes heist. Like he just is intrigued by them. So we thought it would be fun to have him come and talk a little bit about his heist adventures.
Not my personal heist experience.
Yeah, let's make it clear there are no crimes being committed or discussed that we actually committed.
Yeah, I have not actually been involved in a heist, although I may like to. Jen says I'm not capable of it for some reason.
No, I'm sorry, you're not. Don't ever get into heist. So you like this genre, right?
Yes.
Why?
I find it incredibly interesting because it's often a very elaborate plan to break into some sort of highly secure structure or obtain some sort of rare antiquity or artwork or something that's valuable. I just find it incredibly intriguing because when an author of a book or a director of a movie or a screenwriter or whatever you call them creates these worlds, they're often like a realistic setting, and they usually get into great detail of how these masterminds plan and execute these thefts. And I just find it incredibly interesting because it'll go into the execution side of getting into this building, whether it's drilling into it from underneath or like there's some great movies out there like The Italian Job, for example, when it takes place in Venice and they're going on these in these waterways and drilling through the foundation of buildings to get inside without tripping alarm systems, all steal like jewelry or a safe or artwork. And I just find it incredibly interesting how these things take place.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree. I think they're interesting. I think you like it a lot more than I do, but I do like to watch a good heist movie or even read a book about heist, but I think it's very funny because you're so interested in like this life of crime, but like in real life, you're like very much, like a rule follower, like you would never be involved in something like that. So maybe it's kind of like that fantasy world where it's like you appreciate how clever it is or, just people working together to get this, rare thing or something like that.
Well, that's exactly it. I find it incredibly interesting because it's usually people of different skill sets. And like they had the Oceans movies, the Oceans 11, 12, 13, and they all involve people of different skill sets from different walks of life that had a very specific plan for that one particular person to carry out. And it's just usually highly involved. And I just think it's really pretty incredible, actually, and not even necessarily for something for like a big payout, but it's more or less just because I find it highly intriguing that theoretically like years of planning may go into this one day for them to try to get past security or get past an event or something like that to obtain this item that is rare or valuable.
I got you. So, Bryce, you mentioned like, you're familiar with the genre, but you don't really watch a whole lot of stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I've just never like really sought it out. I don't dislike the genre. It's just not something I've seen a lot of. I do think it is interesting in conception, like that. You get this like really neat setup where you got the planning phase and then the execution phase, and some things can go wrong, and that creates like an interesting wrench in the plans, and you can have this really interesting cast of characters that have various skill sets that are useful on the heist, and it's a neat genre.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up because I didn't ever think about it in the way that the skill set part, like, but you're right. Everybody like plays to their specialization. Like they are very specialized in this one thing, or they're really good at, this one particular thing. And it's always like there's a lot of people involved. However, I think like we just watched that show on Netflix called Lupin. And isn't that about like it's kind of heisty, like the guy like takes stuff and
yes.
like it's a French, yeah.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that, but that was a really interesting show. It was kind of light, it was more on the lighter, airy type side, but it was a mix of like con artistry and thievery, which both of those things are really fascinating to me because they most of the time go hand in hand. But it was very well a well organized show. Basically, this guy was trying to get back at people who did his family wrong, and the people he was trying to get revenge on were a wealthy family, and he was doing it by dressing up as different characters and using his his interactions with people or his con artist sleight of hand to get different things in motion, different plans and schemes in motion.
But the ultimate thing was to steal this piece of jewelry and like blame it on somebody else, I think, right? Or something.
Something to that effect.
But my whole point is that was a one person thing.
Right.
Typically, like the Ocean's movies are all like a group of people, or like there was one recently where it was like these older guys. Do you remember that one? It was like these old men and they were planning this big heist.
Yeah, I think that was Tower Heist.
Yes.
It was more like a comedy style. It was interesting.
It's always like a group though, but that Lupin was just like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it was just one guy trying to avenge his family. And so I always think that's kind of a cool thing too, like because you're like, oh, I would never know how to do all that,
Right. And I think that's what's really interesting to me about the con artistry part is that it is so involved. It is very well thought out. Whereas on the other side of things, it's not much different than a scam. And I don't like scammers. Like I don't like telephone scams
Who does?
That kind of stuff. So why do I draw that line and say, well, this is really interesting and really cool, but this part of it, the scam part of it's really lousy, and those people shouldn't do that to people, So I just think think that's a funny way to look at things, which ultimately it's the same thing. So
yeah, you mentioning Lupin reminds me of there is a manga and anime called Lupin the Third.
Yes.
That is about the grandson of Lupin. That I guess is based on the novels. I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I don't know if that's like Lupin the Third is specifically like a heist thing, but I know he's a criminal, so I imagine there's heist involved. I've never seen or read it, but I am familiar with it.
Well, and the show is about this guy who gets his inspiration as a kid. He read the Lupin novels, and that's why, so he isn't, Lupin, but he read the novels, and that's what inspired him for his con artistry, I guess you would say.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of cool. So it's you said, Bryce, that was a manga?
Yes,
How do you say it?
Anime. Manga, I think, but I don't know. We have this conversation every time it comes up. I should
One
learn
day
at
I'm
some
actually
point.
I'm gonna look it up. Like, how do you pronounce it? I think you have it, manga. But yeah, that's kind of cool. So see, it's in all kinds of different genres, or I guess all kinds of different media, I should say. But I liked the recent one, Ocean's 8, I think, that was the one with the woman. There was an all-woman cast, is that right?
Yes, that was really good.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one. Sometimes, like, when you do those, like, ensemble movies, Like, they, sometimes it's not good, but I think the Ocean's ones were very well executed. Kind of like their heists. It's very well executed, but...
One of the things with Heist, that I think... Because I've seen, episodes of TV that do, TV shows that do, a heist in them from one episode. And one of the tropes I particularly enjoy from these is when they're doing, a planning montage. And, they're doing the planning, someone's going through the plan. And they're doing a montage of the people, in the future doing this heist. I think that's a neat trope.
Yeah, I like that too, because you see all the preparation that goes into it, and they have to fine tune every little thing. But that brings me to the heist in real life. So these types of things have happened and they have gone unsolved, which I think is especially interesting. Like how some of these things, I think I talked before about, we watched this docu-series, and it was on art that was stolen from a museum in, was it Boston?
Yeah, it was in Boston.
Yeah, and it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still unsolved, correct?
Yep, that is right. It happened, I want to say, back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's still unsolved, and they have bits and pieces of what happened, but back then, there was the security camera and security footage wasn't as fine-tuned as it is now, of course. But it was still during a big event that was going on at the time, so there's a lot of people around, there's a lot happening. And this museum, small museum, had rare pieces that went missing, and they still haven't surfaced. They haven't surfaced on the black market, or so nobody knows who took them or where they came from, or it's just really, really cool.
Yeah, and one of the shows I talked about when we were talking about the detective genre was White Collar. And that kind of mixes. So it's again, the FBI guy has this consultant who's a criminal. But the criminal is doing all of these heists, even though while he's helping to solve other white-collar crimes. So I think that's a nice little twist on that, because it's you see both sides of it. And then you see oh, is he going to still live this life of crime, or is he going to be on the straight and narrow and help the FBI guy? You know what I mean? So I think that particular show to me is really cool because it kind of mixes both of those.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of my favorite series. It's got its kind of areas where it could be improved, but the overall show itself's really well done. It kind of meshes that world of forgery and replication of works down to in his personal life. He always had these dreams of having enormous wealth, and they show him drinking this bottle of wine that was from the 1700s, 1800s, that was virtually priceless. But what he did was he, created the wine bottle and created the label to match that time period, and poured in another wine with similar characteristics and aged it to make it more authentic. It's just the things that people go through to trick people is just really fascinating to me.
I think also one of the reasons why you're saying you don't like scams, you don't like when people get scammed, but you like the whole heist thing, is because I think most of the time the target is a corporation or a bank or kind of a faceless entity, or really, really rich people. Yeah. And you're kind of I don't know, you don't feel as bad if they get robbed. I don't know.
No, that's probably partially true for sure. And I don't know the creativity involved, but you just don't. As far as scams go, I'm sure there's a lot of creativity involved to make those work.
Right.
But it's just you don't give those the same credit. You're what a bunch of, why don't these people get a real job or whatever, why do they have to steal from poor old people or, whatever. But it's just...
Well, I think with scams, it's a lot of a wider net sort of thing where, part of the reason they work is that you try to target as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Whereas, a heist is a very focused thing. There's a lot more skill involved, at least in, the idealization of it, that you have to... you're targeting one specific thing, and it's a very, tough thing to do, instead of just, casting a wide net.
Good point.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
So, moral of the story is, we're never going to personally be involved in heist, because we don't have that skill set.
or
but
do
we like to watch or read about them. You definitely don't. I'm sorry.
But if anybody wants to do a heist, let me know. I'll find a guy.
So, well, I wanted to mention a piece of heist media that I've played. It's a game, a game series called Payday. And I say it's a heist, and that is what it is in, like, instruction, but it's really more of a just basic shooter sort of action game, because you, like, the idea is you're breaking into, like, a bank or, like, a museum or something to steal a bunch of valuables and make off. And, like, it's possible to do that without, like, alerting anybody. But in most cases, you, like, trip an alarm and end up getting into just, like, a massive shootout.
Oh,
so it's really
goodness.
more of just an action game.
Yeah, sounds like a violent game.
Yeah, and I was about to say, that's another characteristic is a lot of times they're action-oriented because, you know, this is kind of more of a cause and effect type thing, you know? But I do like those movies kind of like also, or I don't know if it would be heist-like, but it is in a sense as far as like the planning and all the detail in it is like the Da Vinci Code type movies or series where it kind of mixes I guess the history and like uncovering documents and like more of, I guess it's more like thriller, or I don't know what you would classify it as, but I always kind of categorize those as the same. You know, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of research, there's, you know, and there's like an element of action or, you know,
race
suspense.
Against time.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
Oh, another game that I've played some of, it's an older game, so it's kind of difficult to play at this point, but, is the Thief series, where you play, I've played the first game, you play as a thief who gets hired to steal stuff.
Oh, there you go.
See, I could get on board with all of this.
Well, in the Thief series, there's also weird magic woodland creature things, that you end up dealing with, so it goes in some weird directions.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. Do the woodland creatures help you?
No, there's some weird plot between, like, they're opposed to, like, some human order of people who want to make everything technology. It's that very basic, like, magic versus technology sort of plot. Your play is a thief caught in the middle of it.
That sounds cool.
Alright, well, I guess we don't have anything else to say about heists.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're good on the heist talk now.
Alright, well, that's been heists. Well, we're doing more genre stuff, and this time we're doing a musical genre. We're going to talk about folk music, specifically American folk music in the past several decades. I don't know when you'd put, like, the start of that, but probably, like, starting in the 60s or so. Something like that.
Like modern folk, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it has roots older than that, you know, there's a lot of, like,
Yeah.
But, like, I'm thinking of basic, like, you know, acoustic guitar, stripped down production, just, like, usually just singing about stuff, a lot of, like, storytelling songs and stuff like that. Ballads, whatnot.
Yeah, this, that reminds me, I don't know, immediately came to mind. What is that show we were watching, Trav? Where the guy with the guitar on the ranch.
Oh, Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, yes. And one of the ranchers, like, has a guitar and just, like, always singing about stuff. It just reminded me of that, like, right off the bat. But no, like, getting into Bob Dylan, so I always think that Bob Dylan's funny, only because, not funny, but, like, I always just kind of smile when I hear Bob Dylan, because I remember our dad talking about, I think, like, he had a roommate that used to listen to Bob Dylan in college, like, constantly, and he got, like, so tired of hearing it. I don't know why I always think of that story.
Yeah, I've
when
heard
I think
that
of,
story, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I can imagine, like, that is a very particular, like, sound, like, Bob Dylan's sound, and I can imagine, like, you might like it, but it gets to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, play something else.
Right, yeah.
So, I can see how that would be bothersome. Yeah.
But speaking of Bob Dylan, though, how do y'all feel about Bob Dylan? He's a very polarizing musician. People seem to either really like him or really hate him.
I don't belong in either of those camps. Like, I think he's cool. I mean, like, of course, like, he had his time as a star, and I think he was, like, obviously massively popular. As far as his music goes, I don't love it or hate it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. He's definitely a big cultural figure, though, and, his voice is very distinctive, and a lot of people don't like it. I mean, I can say, I've never listened to much Bob Dylan, but I've never, disliked the stuff he does, so...
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And I think what makes people typically a cultural icon is whether they take music in a direction it's never been before, whether it's a new sound or something like that. And I think he definitely had that box that he checked, and I think it, drew in a large audience. And but yeah, I don't think I've ever really liked or disliked any music in particular. It doesn't. It's not bothersome whatsoever. It's not, it's just, I just don't gravitate toward it, but I appreciate it, like a lot of things. There's a lot of songs out there that I may not like the song, but I appreciate the direction the music's going, or, what they're talking about, or stuff like that,
Yeah, I like folk music. Like, I think, and that's not really a genre I typically think about much, but thinking of what songs would be considered that, I like it. I think, to me, the songs usually are really easy to get stuck in your head, or easy to sing along to, kind of thing.
Definitely.
I think some of Taylor Swift's stuff gets into that.
Oh yeah, her newer stuff, right?
Yeah. And at first, when I first heard it, I was like, I don't know. And then, when I heard it again, I was like, no, I like it. I can, it's a total vibe. I just think, sometimes you want to chill out and just listen to some, folksy kind of music,
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it definitely lends itself well to live shows as well. To me, it's just, so chill. You have the guitar. It's just, I think, to me, that type of music is easy to connect with an audience.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I feel like it's, now a lot of music this is a general statement, but I feel like there is a lot of emotion in it.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's based off of personal experience, or, what the time dictates at that, at that period in their life, or whatever. And I find that really interesting, because it is a storytelling, and it's a lot of personal relation there, So I think that's really, really interesting. And I think that's what draws a lot of listeners to it,
Yeah. I don't listen to much folk, but, I don't dislike it as a genre. Kind of with heists, too, genres that I'd say I like alright, but they're not my go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, it's not my go-to, but like I said, sometimes, like I said, when you want to vibe out, it's just kind of, chill. Now, Trav, I know for you, sometimes when you want to vibe, you like to listen to kind of like Sublime with Rome kind of stuff, that kind of, I don't know what genre that would it be like. I don't know.
I don't know if it'd be considered more like a pop reggae type. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's got some reggae influence, but to me, sometimes when I just want to chill, listening to some just folksy kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of other, you mentioned.
So I think,
well, I don't know if
right off the top of my head, the one thing I categorize as modern folk would be the Lumineers, or Revivalist, or even Citizen Cope.
Okay.
Even Citizen Cope is more like a hip hop folk to me in a sense. And
That's
I find
a good
that
point.
it's very interesting, and it does connect with the audience in a different light, and I find that stuff very good music when I just want to hang out and maybe go swim and just listen to something kind of lighter or whatever, But yeah, absolutely. It definitely dictates a certain mood for sure.
Yeah, I think because it doesn't rely as much on, maybe this is wrong, but it doesn't rely as much as on the instrumentation as it does like the lyrics. And you know, we talked about music before. I always connect with the lyrics more so than the instruments. I remember, Trav, when you and I first started dating and you were like trying to point out different instruments like in a song to me. You're like, can you hear this one? And I'm like, I don't know. It just sounds like noise. Like it sounds like sounds. I don't know which, like I can't pick out. I am better at that now. But to me, maybe that's why I like the folksy stuff, because it's less on the instrumentation and more on the actual lyrics. I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah, so some folk artists that I like listening to. There's AJJ, which is a folk punk group. I've listened to some of their stuff. Folk punk's basically what it sounds like, you know. It's you take the folk instrument and, you know, vocals and general sort of vibes, and you like speed it up a bit and get a bit more yelly with it. Yeah. But you know, it's a really good mesh together, because they're both genres that are a lot more about like the emotion more so than the instruments.
Yes.
Not that the instruments aren't important, but you know, the emotion, I think, takes front and center there.
That's a good point. Yeah, like the punk, you're right. It kind of, I like how you say it gets a little more yelly. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's something I wouldn't have considered either, like that genre as fitting into that. But you're right.
Yeah, and another one that I've talked about before, actually, I think I talked about when Travis was on, is the microphones.
Yes.
Yeah. And actually, we did a microphone song on our podcast.
On the mixtape.
The mixtape, yes.
It wasn't on the mixtape, it was when we both picked 2 songs, which I guess was the proto mixtape.
Oh. Okay, gotcha.
But The Glow Part 2, I really like that album. It's got some folk elements. I mean, it also has some like ambient electronic elements and like some noise involved. But it is like a pretty folksy album too, so it's one of my favorite albums.
Yeah, I love it. I love that it like originated like I guess a lot of music and the storytelling, you know, part. And I was trying to think of some older like musicians like around the Bob Dylan.
Yeah, so Woody one Guthrie. That sticks out right away to me is the first thing I thought of was the Marshall Tucker Band.
Okay.
The song "Can't You See"?
Yes.
That one, I know it's more a classic rock, you know, by modern standard, but it's very storytelling. It's very relatable, and it's just got a ton of emotion to it. And pretty much it's a song that if anybody heard the opening line to it, they would know what song it was right away, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a characteristic of, you know, folk music is to be relatable. And I think that no matter where you're from, what background, if you hear the first few lines of that song, you'd automatically know what song it is, and it's somewhat relatable, you know?
That's true. I think of like Joni Mitchell, that's really, you know, I can't think of any other. Simon and Garfunkel, of course.
Oh,
I mean, would that be considered folk?
Yeah, they're folksy, definitely.
Yeah, I like Simon and Garfunkel. I can definitely jam to them. Those songs always get stuck in my head, too.
Yeah, any other artists y'all want to mention? Favorites? Least favorites, even?
Least favorites.
No, it kind of makes me want to get into it more, like more modern folk, and just kind of see if there's anything out there that's interesting, because it is an interesting genre, and it's almost like everybody's. I mean, in a lot of music, it's the same way, but specifically, everybody's trying to tell their story, you know, or tell their experience, and I think that's pretty cool, you know, for sure.
Well, I think of like so. A modern one, like Phoebe Bridgers. I'm not super familiar, but I know that that's like her jam is kind of like folk stuff. And I know she's real popular, so she's won the I can't think of the name of her song that I know, but there's a few of them.
Yeah, she was in a band with Julian Baker.
Okay.
Who, and I've listened to her. She's also kind of folksy. One of her albums, Turn Out the Lights. It's a very depressing album, but I think it's a neat little album. So, yeah, that's a neat connection.
Well, and that's a good point. yeah, some of these folksy stuff, it does get a little depressing. So it's like, you have to kind of watch, because some of it falls into that where you're like, oh man, you're bumming me out. Like, I gotta change this. You know? It's like not the vibe I'm going for. But it's still a good genre, I think. Like, I like, because you don't hear a ton of it, at least in, like, I guess pop culture. You know, now I don't hear a ton of it, but I guess there is that, you know, that the whole genre, I'm sure that people really love, but
yeah,
I don't hear a lot of it.
Well,
so that's
Taylor
why I like
Swift.
it when, like, Taylor Swift, as I mentioned, goes into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the whole aesthetic, too. It's just, like, you know, kind of, I think of, like, flowy dresses and, like, kind of, like, 60s-ish, 70s-ish, you know, kind of flower child type of vibes.
It's kind of like a come as you are mentality, you know what I mean? Like this everybody's welcome kind of deal, you know?
I'm sorry, but that's a grunge song.
Yeah, no, not the song itself.
I know, I'm making a joke.
I was gonna say. Yeah. Music joke. Yeah.
But yeah, they have a few bands, like modern bands that I'd classify in there, and like Alabama Shakes, like Revivalists. I think those have like more instrumentation or more complex instrumentation than what I typically think of, but I think they fit that genre really well, you know. But it definitely makes me want to dive into it a little bit more and see what else is out there too, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to like go sit out by the pool, like throw some folk music on.
Perhaps. But one of the things I think's interesting about folk, and I guess this is true for a lot of genres, but I feel like it's very true for folk, is that it's very malleable. It can fit in with a lot of different, like, genres. Like, you have, you know, country, obviously, that, like, there's a definite continuum there, but you have, like, the blues, and then you have, like, some folk rock stuff, like, back in the day, and you have, like, modern folk stuff that, like, mixes with indie rock, and there's, like, a good overlap there.
Yes.
And then you have more modern, like, pop folk stuff, where you add some, like, pop production stuff in, and I feel like it's a very flexible genre, and folk punk, like I mentioned, you know, it can fit in with quite a few different things, and it's definitely interesting in that regard.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, like, I think there's probably a lot of music that I don't think of as folk music, but it kind of is. So I think you're absolutely right that it kind of crosses genres a bit. And to me, you know, I like them all. I'm not really a huge fan of country, obviously, but I say obviously because I think I've mentioned it before.
Yes, definitely.
But there are some songs that cross into that aren't bad songs. I mean, you know, I just I don't like when it gets like real kind of twangy into the country genre, but yeah, I think you're right. Like, it can be, there are even like, I guess like hip hop songs, like you're saying, Trav, you mentioned, can be folksy, and I like those kinds of things. Like, I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, would you even consider like old R&B, like from back in the 60s and 70s, even some of that, even though it had more of like a bass line and more of a but it's still kind of shared experience, shared that same kind of audience, captivating.
I think kind of like B.B. King, like some of that stuff could be considered folksy, I think.
That blues feel, sure.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting, too far into the other genres, but
no, I mean,
it's kind of hard for me to pick out what's folksy.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Like, you have things get intertwined so much. That's how different music's created over years, so I mean, you take influence from one and they may adapt it and use it in another. That's why you have like Santana working with hip hop artists, it's not just it's everything does mesh well together. It's a matter of putting those puzzle pieces together and trying something they've never tried before.
Yeah. So like John Mayer would probably be considered folksy.
Yeah, or just generally bad music.
Yeah, I feel like when he first came out, I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then, like, eventually I was like, oh,
Yeah,
come on, man.
yeah.
Like...
I think that's my opinion as well.
Bryce, you have an opinion on John Mayer?
No, not really. I don't care either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like a running joke, I think,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people like make fun of that music. I don't know. But yeah. So, yeah, I would definitely want to dive into the land of folk a little bit more.
Right, well, do we have anything else, or you'll take us out, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of exhausted that topic now, so, but, again, Travis said he's inspired to listen to more, so maybe we'll have him on again and talk about it some more. So I just wanted to say thank you to our guest, Trav, for talking with us today. It's always a good time, and thank you guys for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time. This has been Beach View. Bye!
Bye.
Bye.